What are the two unassailable rules of writing fiction? That's what we're going to talk about in today's episode. So welcome back to Coffee with the Authors, where we share what we've learned, often the hard way, about the craft and business of writing.
There are no rules to writing because it's an art, not a science. But having said that, the first rule to writing fiction is have good stuff.
What does that mean?
What does that mean?
That means having characters we care about and dialogue that seems authentic and an interesting plot and scenes that resonate, things like that.
Okay, so this is going to sound silly, but rule number 2 is don't have bad stuff.
Everybody has bad stuff. So the rule is actually to get rid of your bad stuff. So if you have dialogue that's overwrought, or if you have scenes that go on too long, or you have plot threads to nowhere, those sorts of things, they're in everybody's manuscript. Well, almost everybody's manuscript to start with, but the goal is to weed those out so that you don't have bad stuff.
The whole thing does sound kind of goofy because it's like, okay, have good stuff and don't have bad stuff. And it seems like one follows the other. Okay, if I have good stuff, then I won't have bad stuff. But the thing is, this is the kind of the big secret. It's the unwritten rule number 3, which is rule number 1 and rule number 2 have nothing to do with each other. They're totally separate. So in your mind, they become two completely different things. Rule number 1 is mostly taken care of during the actual writing phase, the drafting. And rule number 2 is taken care of during the editing phase. Because when we first start writing, we generally don't have any good stuff at all. At least I didn't. And then we get a little bit better, and then, oh, look, there's some good stuff here. Great, we're all happy. And then pretty soon we realize, oh, this is a good scene. This is a good scene. And then you read the good scene, and then you get a little bit bored during the transition there, but you think that's okay because coming up soon is this really good action scene, and I know it's good. And so you jump ahead to that and you read that. So we still have good stuff in there, but the problem is we also have bad stuff in there. And so you have to do two different things. You have to generate actually good writing that is compelling and is going to grab people's attention. And you also have to eliminate anything that's clunky or bad writing or over expository or, worst of all, boring.
It's like a garden where you've thrown out a bunch of seeds, let's say wildflower seeds, and then in between all those seeds are kind of weeds pop up. And if you don't go and pull out the weeds, they're going to choke out the pretty flowers. And so writing is sort of like that. The weeds are bound to grow. As you're putting together your story, you're bound to take an aside that goes to nowhere. But then when you get through your whole story, you realize that thread went nowhere. Or maybe you started a thread. This is one of my pet peeves when I'm reading a story. They'll introduce a character, and as you just know that character is going to have some effect on the protagonist somewhere along the line. And then you never hear from them again. They're just gone. Well, what happened to so-and-so? So this is something that was put in with maybe the thought of that they would have a role later, but then they don't. So really, that character needs to be pulled out. So you have the good stuff, but in between, there are these encroaching weeds. And you need to recognize the nettles, from the flowers that you want.
I really think one of the most important things for writing good fiction is to recognize bad writing in other people's work and in your own work. And it's hardest to recognize it in our own work.
It's our words, so it's harder for us to ascertain that that's not good stuff. So it's a skill that you learn. The more you do it, the more you go over your pages, the more you edit. It's a skill that you acquire to be able to separate what really is good from what maybe isn't.
And you have to be able to step back and kind of look at it objectively and say, as much as I love this scene or love this line, I think it's clever, and I'm guilty of this a lot.
Oh, it's so hard.
It is. You're right. Oh, that's so funny. But it adds nothing. It slows things down or whatever. And even worse than that are things that are just like over-explaining because they make the reader feel like you're insulting their intelligence or, just kind of over-expository, as you know, Bob, sort of dialogue, all those things. So if we can recognize those in our work and get rid of them, then the reader won't come along and then stumble. The reader's in your book, in your scene, and then if they come along something that's clunky, they're thrown out of the story. It's like, oh, the writer did this kind of inelegant thing here, and I kind of tripped and almost fell off the path of the story. So you want to get rid of those things. And the first step to getting rid of those things is you have to recognize that they're there and recognize that even though they came from our brains and we love them, they have to go.
The 10th time you've gone over your manuscript, you know it really well. So you get to a place where you kind of know what's coming up, and there are parts that you like to reread because they're good. But then if you find your mind drifting during other parts because you know it so well and you're sort of blanking out during it, look at that again, because that's going to contain stuff that you can streamline or maybe cut the entire thing out. If you've said one thing up here and you have a paragraph of something else here, consider just Xing out that in-between slot and see how it reads. And the faster that you can get it to move along, without losing the heart of your story, the better it's going to be for your reader. Because if you're drifting off during that portion, you can bet that your reader's starting to think about other things too. You want to keep them engaged, and to keep them engaged, you've got to get rid of the bad stuff or the stuff that doesn't really contribute to your story. So we hope that you've gotten something useful out of this episode and that you'll come back and have another cup of coffee with us. Meanwhile, remember to dream big, work hard, don't give up.
And keep writing.
I think they were probably flirting with each other.
Yeah, flirting. Oh, that's like what you're doing. You're flirting with me.
Flirting with you.
All right, so men, when you get insulted, don't worry. It's just flirting.
Yeah. That's what she'll tell you.
That's what she'll tell you.